before I forget. Awesome. Okay, cool. Oh my gosh, I love it. Stevie, I'm so glad you're here with us. Thank you so much for being here with us. Excellent bio. I know we can't wait to hear more about you, but can you tell us a little more about LeafLink before we get started?
Yeah, well, first, Jesse and Women Who Code, thank you for having me. Always been a fan of Women Who Code since even being an IC application developer. Getting out of my career in New York City has been, the chapter has been a great way for me to network and build my career through community. So really always appreciate doing work with you all. So LeafLink is a unified B2B platform for the cannabis industry, as you alluded to in my bio. The platform itself is built upon a wholesale marketplace, and it streamlines commerce between licensed, and that's important, licensed cannabis brands and retailers. Right. And it does this through the full order life cycle, and that includes the payments and working capital management that my team oversees, as well as the logistics and fulfillment and insights and marketing services. We move right now about 4.5 billion in GMV, so that's gross merchandise volume. I didn't know what that was before I joined. So dollars transacted, and we have over 10,000 businesses that we operate and support. And right now we're a little over 250 employees, and we're a Series C with 131 million in VC funding. So that's kind of the snapshot of LeafLink as a whole.
Amazing. Can you tell us more about the software engineering side?
Yeah, so our engineering team is a makeup of app dev, QA, and DevOps. And right now we have 80 in that group. When I joined, it was just around 25. So in a little over a year, we've gotten to that. And across product design, data, and engineering, which is essentially all of our tech, we're about 120. And we plan to double that next year as well. So if you're interested at all in a new role, my shameless plug, please do reach out. There's going to be so many opportunities in management, associate, mid, senior, staff engineer, principal level roles. So definitely please reach out. We do operate, thinking about how do we operate as a team, we do follow the Spotify tribe and squad model. Of course, we have our own slight variation on that. The importance is that we deliver as cross-functional units that are autonomous. And I think the collaboration there as well with the cross-functional partners. Tech stack is always interesting, I think, in these conversations. So we're on AWS EKS. We're primarily Vue.js on the front end and Python on the back, but we are starting to introduce Go and GraphQL. So that's exciting. And I think when we think about career, which is always really important to me as a manager and leader in engineering, we really do want to highlight on the managerial and tech tracks. I think it's really important to highlight and support everyone's strengths and development. I know that there's a divide in the industry where, sometimes to advance in your career, you have to be a manager or you're a tech lead. That's kind of a hybrid. So we really want to make sure there's a separate tracks to provide to our engineers.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. Speaking straight to me there. So what types of projects are you working on at LeafLink? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's the payments and liquidity, technical strategies and teams. So I joined in October 2020. And when I joined, it was really in its infancy. Like there was some, build, but they really hadn't launched anything. There's only 2 engineers. So it really was like, let's get these MVP products out. Let's build the team and meet those milestones. And I am proud to say we've done that. I lead a team now of 22. We've launched a bunch of products, and some of them are even beyond slight MVP phase. And what they do is they allow our retailers and which are our brands, in our brands, to pay and get paid the way they want. So we offer flexible and direct payment options. And our flexible payments, you could think of it as this is where that credit and capital management and cash flow come in. So if you were to get a credit to spend on the platform with a due date, and our direct payments are essentially like an ACH facilitation. So think like what Venmo does. And, I think one thing to call out, and this might not be as known, is we've had to face a lot of obstacles because cannabis is not federally legalized. So we don't have access to, say, like a Stripe to integrate with. So we've had to innovate a lot and slightly build things that kind of already exist out there quickly in order to really get the money movement aspect of the integrations with our banks. So that's been something I think the team has been the most proud of our accomplishments so far. And 2022 will be about scaling all of that and building adoption around what we've launched. And of course, there will be some new product offerings as well.
Amazing. Will you tell us more about managing other engineers and managers?
Yeah, so I mentioned my team's 22, and that does include engineering managers and staff engineers. In my last role, I did manage a team of 90, and my direct reports primarily were senior managers and principals. So I have definitely had a breadth of being able to manage different seniority types and different autonomy, right? I think autonomy comes into play there when, how do you make sure you're empowering and giving space to individuals, and they're going to require different things based on their roles. And, in addition to that, I've managed globally at all three companies where I was a people manager. So that's also comes with its own challenges, and I think makes us all better to constantly be reminded of inclusion, especially during the pandemic, when you have people who don't have the same access to things that we do right now. So in general, I think, my ability to be a more compassionate person, I do think a lot of that came also from managing individuals and having to somewhat show up with that every day. If I had to describe my management style, if that's something you're interested in 5 words, which I always love this question because I feel like it's the biggest one I give to managers in interviews. And then I'm always like reflective on myself, like, oh yeah, but how would you answer this one? It would definitely be empathetic, I think first, humble, empowering, inclusive, and distributed. And there's actually a style out there known as feminist leadership, and it's made famous by a lot of NGOs. ActionAid actually, I know, has a big program on it. And it definitely has those elements trickled in it. And I identify with that a lot as well. Other elements is, being reflective, zero tolerance, and feedback, self-care. Talk about those holidays and that you're grateful for. Those are really important. Mental health days are real health days. And I think the biggest one is eliminating bias, right? And trying to recognize that, we're all diverse and have all different needs. So I think that's my management style. And I think, yeah, I know I'm just like talking. I can pause. I could also keep going. So your call, Jessie.
I like to hear your management style, honestly. Like I'm always super curious, but I'm also like, oh man, will you be my manager? You sound like super like a great manager. But yeah, I know you're taken. So we can talk a little about company culture if you want, and then we can get more into your journey. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm culture is an interesting thing to also get asked. I think depending on the person, it can be interpreted different or it could be seeked differently. I always like to think that culture is the output of the behaviors and actions of a company's employees. And so when I think about LeafLink's culture, I absolutely think it's an embodiment of our core values, and not to continue putting LeafLink on a pedestal, but of course, that is part of my passion. Our core values are very surrounded in collaboration, inclusion, cultivating a better community, which is one of my favorites, and transparency and trust. So I absolutely think, that's a really great way to describe our culture. But then, if you're on the other side of it, where you're like, well, what about, those wellness days, and how do you take care of, your employees? I get that part of it too. And I think it is part of showing up and creating a space where people want to show up every day. And we do have an amazing people team with a person dedicated to employee engagement. So we have a lot of that as well. And it's top of mind, and we're constantly doing different things and getting people together. And I think one of the things I've been most impressed by is how they've showed up to be such an adaptable company for remote first and virtual working with the pandemic. I came in and onboarded through that, and I couldn't even tell that that wasn't the way that they started. They've done an amazing job. And in fact, we've already started hiring employees remote. And I think we're going to stick to trying to operate that way and be flexible. So if another shameless plug, if you're not in NYC or you know someone that's not in NYC, also send them our way, because LeapLink is a remote friendly company.
Yes. So everyone, Stevie wants you to apply for LeapLink. This is clear. She's said this a few times. So please do check out her posts in our Slack channel and look for her on LinkedIn. So with that being said, let's talk more about you. The real stuff. You're so awesome. I've heard so many good things about you. People love you. You do this quite often. You give back to the community, which is just really awesome, right? I love that about you, Stevie. And yeah, I just want to hear a little more about your journey and, you know, how you've become director of engineering and what was that journey like?
Yeah, thank you, Jesse, for those kind words. Yeah, my journey is, I could go far as back as, you know, when I decided I wanted to be a computer scientist, because I think that was the term.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I was very fortunate that my mother showed me access to that early on when it wasn't very transparent and visible, right? And that is the whole, I know, one of the biggest missions of women who code, because it's still an issue, right? And I think it was age 10 that I realized I wanted to do it. It was a bring your daughter to work day. Again, let's talk about antiquated terminology and systems, where I came to Lockheed Martin. I know, take your daughter to work day. Let's show them what they can do. I went to Lockheed Martin, where she worked at the time. And I remember, you know, we got to see the Mars rover prototype, very cool. And I was definitely a space nerd, but we went into the server room. And I remember they had 2 servers, and they were like, the guy was like, I make this talk to this. And I was like, magic. I need to know how it works. Yeah. And it was age 10. Yeah. That I asked my mom, like, I want to do this. And she struggled so hard to find me any resources and ability to do that. And of course it was the basic, let's learn to type, remember keyboarding classes, and then intro to Microsoft Office, just silly stuff. But it was, I guess, important for the foundation of getting familiar with a computer. And through that, you know, especially as the internet really opened up, I was able to just kind of learn on my own and find my own avenues. MySpace, of course, was a really great way to learn HTML and all of that. And I might be showing my age, I'm not sure.
No, you're not. Yeah. MySpace go ahead. Sorry. I could interrupt. We could geek out about this. I'm so there. But yeah, continue. This is your interview.
No worries. But you know, I took I did find access to some programming courses and things in high school. I competed a bit, and it was very evident that, you know, that was the track I was going to go on. I went to school for computer science, and then I minored in business administration, because I also was like very fascinated about business. And I think that's really been a trend in my career as a whole, the intersection of finance and tech. But I think it also probably gave me a lot of really great fundamentals for management and leadership as well.
You actually have a lot of business knowledge. When we were speaking earlier, you were just flowing with so many words that I'm not familiar with, like where I couldn't really, you know, as an engineer, I'm not really familiar with the business side. So it's super cool to hear you kind of you're so diverse.
I appreciate that, Jesse. And I think like the domain aspect really does help when you're thinking about your career. I think we lose that sometimes. And I even deviated a little bit, which, you know, kind of takes me to like what happened after college. I I definitely started out in financial tech. In fact, I went to Wall Street. I worked at two major investment institutional banks, Credit Suisse and Morgan Stanley. I learned a lot. I did all kinds of different things there. I did algorithmic trading. I did pricing engines. I did integrations with, major companies like Bloomberg. I got to work with some of the smartest people and quantitative strategists that worked under Stephen Hawking and take their financial models and commercialize them. I got to do a lot of fun stuff, but it was definitely clear, like once I got to management there, that I was getting further and further away from tech. So like going back to what you're saying, although the domain was great, I was passionate about being an engineer. And not only was I moving into management maybe a little bit more quickly than I was ready for at the time, I was starting to feel, and I think we might all be familiar with the word imposter syndrome at the time early on. And I also started to realize that my identity, which I know I present as a woman, and I actually do identify as gender fluid. So my pronouns are she, they, and I'm also I identify as queer and date multiple genders. So it was really hard for me sometimes to feel like I could be my authentic self as well. And that's not a stab to Wall Street or big companies or anything. It was just my experience at that time. And so, I think it opened up a lot for me. After doing that for 7 years, Wall Street, I realized a couple of things. I wanted to be able to be my authentic self at work. I wanted to encourage and create those spaces for others at companies that I was part of. I also wanted to take a step back and go back to IC work and engineering and really start to hone in on the craft and explore what was out there and take a deep breath. And one of my favorite things I've ever received as an advice on a career and in your career and building your career is like a rock wall. It's not always straight up to get there. Sometimes you'll have to take a hold sideways or even take a step down to get a better hold to move and propel yourself up. And that was a humbling moment to take on and say, yeah, I'm going to take a step down. I'm going to go back and I want to leave finance. What else is out there? And I want to join a startup. So those were my elements. And I don't know if anyone here is a believer in manifestation, but I put it out there. Yeah, I put it out there in the universe.
Real.
Yeah.
It's like manifestation is real. I just told someone that my partner actually, it was like, manifestation's real, okay? We don't have to manifest.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, we have more questions, Stevie.
Yeah, sure.
But no, this is so good. And like, this is what I wanted to get to. I wanted to get to your journey and look, all the good stuff's coming out, even though I'm glad we taught everyone about LeapLink, but we really want to hear about you.
Yeah.
And I love that you say that about like your journey. I like to reference the meme where it's like how everyone thinks success is meant to look. And it's like just a graph with like an upward, trajectory arrow, but actually it's like, then it's like what it really looks like. And it's like this scribbling like line just going everywhere. Like that's truly like what our journeys turn out to be, right? That's right. How life is. And you just have to persevere and keep going, which it sounds like you've done. And you've had like amazing to hear about all that you've experienced. We'll have to have a follow-up series to ask you more questions about that.
No worries.
So what is you kind of gave us some advice, but what is your advice to engineers like myself and other women on the call? And I'm going to bundle this with, we spoke before and, you said like, it's really important for you to be in a company that values your personal values, right? And things that align with your goals. Can you tell us a little more about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love giving advice because I think there was a lack of it as I was advancing in my career. It was really hard to find women or women identifying role models in tech that I could lean on, and it still is. So happy to answer this question for sure. I think the biggest thing that I tend to tell people is, don't get caught up on what's next and where your deficiencies are. It is so easy to get overwhelmed and feel like you have to put hours and hours into your development. And I think it increases every year because tech is exponentially growing. And there is a real fatigue in that. Instead, I'd ask yourself, like, what do I need to know to be slightly better at what is right in front of me? I mean, some examples of that are like, do you understand the latest version of the language you're using at work, right? Or the next one that's in beta that you could influence your company to leverage, or be ready to leverage when it's time. Do you feel fluent in the frameworks that you're working within? Are there things that you think are just magic that you could understand a little bit more? How good is the breadth of your knowledge for your whole tech stack? Let's say you're front end focused. Like, do you understand how the back end works? Let's say you're back end focused. Do you understand how DevOps and infrastructure works? And do you truly understand the why for what you're building? I think that's a really good one. It helps eliminate mistakes, bugs, and it motivates you to help you understand why you're building what you're building. And lastly, I think another way, to not hyperfixate on that is to focus on team delivery and partnership. I think this is where humility, again, I'm really big on humility, comes into play. We all have our strengths and geniuses, and we will forever be a work in progress and have areas for improvement. So I think, leveraging your team to complement those and stepping in to help out others too with your strengths is a really great way to also focus your energy.
Yeah, that's really true. I love all of those points. Humility is always a big one. The why, definitely. I always feel better when I understand why I'm coding something a certain way. It helps me deliver a better product, definitely. So you've touched on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why is DEI important?
Yeah, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I feel like is just important. I don't know why it wouldn't be important, but I think it's also really just important to know that we understand what it means. I was telling Jesse before this, I want to be very, like, I might look at my notes because I think these things are important that are, not to get wrong in terms of, the definition and what they are. But diversity is, and I'm going to look at my notes. Diversity is the presence of differences. So that's really what it is, right? And I think when we think of that, it's really the underrepresented groups that have been marginalized in society. And this isn't, they have been and they still are. I think we've all maybe been a little bit more aware of that in the last year and a half than maybe previously. I'm not sure where everyone's at on that spectrum, but I know DEI is a fad right now because of that. And it has always been something we should focus on. Equity is promoting the justice of those inequalities for those diverse and marginalized groups through procedures, processes, resources, allocation, and systems. And the inclusion is the outcome to ensure that the diverse actually feel they're welcomed, right? And that they're part of decision making. So the inclusion part of it is actually the work, right, for the diverse, and the equity are the things we're doing for them. So, I identify as I mentioned, multiple underrepresented groups, but I also recognize my privilege as a white Caucasian person. So I think also it's about realizing that there are multiple facets to it, and we all have our different struggles in oppression in that space as well.
Yeah. And what do you do personally to help DEI?
Yeah, I mean, DEI, I think could be considered an initiative, right, for women as an underrepresented group. So I'm always willing and wanting to participate in events like this, and just be in spaces. Yeah, and just be in spaces. I think spreading awareness where I can, and be someone that can lead by example. I go back to what I said earlier. I was asking you if that was something I should say, right? Like I feel weird saying, oh, I'm a role model. But I think
you are.
but
Stop.
I appreciate that, Jesse. But I think what I really mean by that is like, I didn't have anyone at all really at this type of level or someone this far in their career that I could listen to or hear or talk to. And so it's important for me to just show up in these spaces and be a listening ear, and help where I can. I talked about my privilege and amplifying those around me. And I think, if I had to say there's one other thing, I mean, it's also just participating where you have influence, right? So I think, at my company, I'm really, in all the companies I've ever been at, I've been an active participant in DEI initiatives and making it a priority, or hoping that it's a priority, and contributing where I can. And I actually don't usually join companies unless they have that is a top mission, because again, I want to be able to show up as my authentic self and feel welcome there.
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny. The longer I'm in the industry, which I'm still fairly new to the industry, the more it matters to me that the culture and, the company I currently work for is very, they care very much about women in tech, which is super helpful, but it definitely changes, right? Like you want to see it in your day to day. So we kind of are wrapping up now towards the end of our questions. Do you want to give us some stats, some LeafLink women stats, women who code there, or maybe, who work there, or to like, just give us an idea on how you guys prioritize. Another little plug for LeafLink.
I appreciate it, Jesse. Yeah, I mean, the stats, can always be better. I actually, I think it's always hard when you're at a company that's doubling every year to be able to maintain a proper ratio when these pools are already so lean to pull from. When I know LeafLink started back in 2016, it was 4 members, 2 female, 2 male. So that was great. It was 50-50. Now 33% of the employees at LeafLink are women. So slightly under that 50, but it, in tech, it's not much, it's not as good. It's 17%. So, again, as someone who is a leader in tech, I really, really, really like prioritize wanting to close that gap. But it's harder than it is easy. But I think we have a great strategy with our diversity mandates from our talent acquisition team. We have good from the sourcing. It's like a good representation for sourcing, and then we do unbiased resume scrubs for hiring managers. We have objective and consistent interview processes. So that it's definitely not a lack of intention. I think it's just the nature of the industry.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, you're the director of engineering, you would know, right? And I find it interesting that, yeah, you're probably fielding or scanning a lot of resumes. So you can only do so much with your candidate pool, right? You probably get a lot more men than you do women. I'm just assuming. So yeah, that makes it difficult. So thank you for doing what you do. And thank you so much for sharing your background and your journey with us. And with that, I am going to open up the floor for a Q&A. Anyone who has questions, or we're going to take about 10 minutes to, give you guys the opportunity to ask questions to Stevie. So if you'd like, I guess you can ask, and I think you can just unmute. Yeah, you can unmute yourself. And as long as we are polite and don't step on each other's toes, if you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and shoot. Does anyone have a question for Stevie? see a few people agreed with you in the chat. About changing from finance to tech. No questions, guys? I guess I could kick it off with another question.
For it.
So I find it interesting that when you were growing up, you were so young and you thought like, this is what I want to do. I want to work with this magic. And I guess, did you find that your high school or your development, like early development, gave you the opportunity to seek out engineering? Did you feel like it was attainable? I'm just curious what that experience was like. And, if it wasn't, how did you kind of overcome like being the only girl in the class?
Yeah, I think what it did is it helped me focus as a freshman going into school, right? I know a lot of freshmen struggle with like what their major is, and maybe waste a little bit of time. I wouldn't say waste time, but they take more of their general classes in the beginning. But I definitely, looked around and there was already maybe like 4 or 5 of us. And, by the time graduation came, I was the only to graduate. So I think that was always something in the back of my mind as I was navigating, I had always a lot of male friends regardless, but it was always something that was just like, oh, okay. And I had a couple of professors who maybe made me feel a little othered, even borderline inappropriate, like with some of their rhetoric, right? But I saw it as like more of a reason to keep going, right? For me, I don't know if we're astrology people here, but I have a Leo sun, Aries moon, some very fiery, action oriented and and competitive. And so, I kept going and pushing through, but that didn't stop, right? I think that's part of it. It was always a competitive space and, in interviewing and on teams, and still, it's an ongoing thing, which is again why I'm here and why I do what I do.
We have a few questions.
All right.
So our first question is from Stefania. Hopefully I'm saying that right. What advice would you give someone who just started on this career path?
I go back to the original one I did about not getting overwhelmed with having to learn everything. If you're, I guess, Stefania, have you already gone through the vocational training or undergrad degree, and you're just starting out in your career, or are you thinking about going into engineering now? Trying to understand where you're at. Boot camp. Great. Awesome. So that's the hardest job to nail. It is. Keep going to events like this, keep networking, keep practicing, build a portfolio, and be okay with doing some internships. Because I think sometimes it is the practical experience that companies really want to see as well. Because there's something with, the enterprise way of doing things versus, the modular classroom. So, I think a lot of, especially boot campers have a lot of success. And sometimes it's not the sexiest internship or, the highest paying, but just taking the opportunity to do some enterprise, level work benefits you a lot. And then look for companies that have associate and entry level jobs, because I think a lot of the times it's easy just to go for your favorite. And that can be hard. And usually going through their internship program lands you a full time. So I think look for those programs as well. We're hiring some associates next year as well. The requirement is 6 months of professional experience. So if you can do a 6-month internship, hit me up. We'd happy to interview you.
Wow, there you go. Nice. And hey, also, Stefania, I came from a boot camp and you have to apply everywhere. Be super honest in your personal statement and just take any opportunity you can get, just what Stevie says. And now I have a full-time job and I'm making average salary and keeping up with the guys. So just like perseverance is key and focus, focus, focus. Our next question is Alice. Alice Wang asks, how have you found mentors you could open up to? Ooh, I love this one.
It's a great question.
Great
I was
question.
just telling someone, I don't know that I've truly ever had a real mentor. And again, I think it goes back to like not having the representation there and people that I want to be, I guess, or I look to be like, or that look like me, or I identify as. But I've had a lot of sponsors and I've had a lot of people who have believed in me and given me opportunities. And people I feel genuinely cared about my advancement, development, and progression. So if I look at it that way, I think it's just building that trust and rapport, right, through interacting and working with them, and seeing them go out and do things for you without expectation of anything for them. That also builds a lot of that trust to open up. But yeah, it's definitely a difficult thing. And I say this all the time, and I have people come out to me and say, don't be afraid just to ask someone if they have some time to chat. Like if you see someone, whether it's at work or in an event or, on a social media, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I am so inspired by that person, or that person's doing what I want to do, reach out to them and see if they have like 30 minutes to chat. And take those opportunities. I think that's also a really good way. And then over time, right, you like any relationship, you will feel more comfortable being more vulnerable.
That's really great advice. And also Women Who Code, Alice, definitely anyone there, we're in the Slack channel. We are there for you. So yeah, it's a great, it is, it is hard to find people who look like you, especially, right? But yeah, asking never hurts. That's a great answer, Stevie. So Gong Yuting says, hey Stevie, can you talk about what you think are the most important skills to excel as a woman in tech? I am pivoting from data analytics job in finance to a software engineer job in tech, so I'd like to get some advice. All right.
Awesome. Two-part question. I hear what are skills that would benefit me as a woman in tech, and then the second is, I'm pivoting, and how could I better position myself for that. So I think gender aside, all skills are the same, right? In fact, I think if anything, you will bring your own skills and geniuses and things to the table that are naturally going to just be easy for you based on maybe other foundational training or interest or just who you are as a person. But when you're talking about showing up for the job, right, it's those fundamental skills, those foundational skills that everyone needs to be able to excel in as a competency for being an engineer, right? So implementation, code structure, communication skills, collaboration skills, and then, you could go more granular than that, right? Testing, clean code, optimizations, OEM solutions, APIs, there's a lot there, right? So I think getting practice, just go for interviews, even if you don't know you're going to get the job, to get a feel of what an interview is like. There's a lot of websites out there that you can practice, like HackerRank, what technical interviews could feel like. Sometimes companies do really, really algorithmic, like theory-based, I probably would never have to do this on the job questions. And sometimes they do very practical applied questions. And you're going to get a variation of both. So I think practicing both will be really good, and just continuing to finesse those foundational skills. From a pivot, I think your analytical and problem solving skills are going to serve you really great. And, I imagine as a data analytics person, you're doing some probably functional declarative type programming, maybe through Python and SQL. So again, like that is definitely going to serve you well as a basis. But I think getting more familiar with, design patterns and, service to service communication and architecture will also benefit you to start thinking about how do these things scale outside of just, the way I'm defining them for data.
Yes, I love that. Stevie, you're very smart, girl. You're super smart.
Thanks, Jess.
So Jing has a question. I kind of like this question. This is a good question. Any tech or leadership book, video, class recommendations?
Wow, tech or leadership book, video, class recommendations. Yes. Of course, I'm put on the spot.
Oh no! Oh my gosh! Do you want me to give you one?
Oh, sure, you can.
There's one that my old boss gave, and he was so good. He said, I think it's from coder to developer or developer to coder. I'm probably getting it backwards, but let me look it up. And it's a great way for you to kind of just understand, development as a whole and not just as like a coder, like punching in like small, algorithms, but going and seeing like the big picture. That's one I would recommend, but I've been reading that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the one book I always suggest for any engineer is the Phoenix Project. I think that's a really good one as well. And for leadership, that's where my head was going. It's like, oh, there's so many for leadership. There's a bunch. I could provide some, and I could do a whole resource thing, and we can post it in the Women Who Code Slack channel.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. But Jing, that means you have to join Slack. So I will, when you guys are in breakout rooms, I will post the Slack URL because I don't want to click too much while we're talking. Oh, Phoenix Project. Ooh,
there we go.
Is it really? I want to hear more about this.
Oh yeah, you need to read it. It's so good.
Oh gosh. Cool. I'm going to put it on my list. Any other questions, you guys? We could go ahead and do breakout rooms and then Stevie's just going to drop by. We don't have to do that many people. We could do like 2 different breakout rooms, but yeah, I'm going to put you guys in breakout rooms and then you guys just network and, let each other like share, please share your LinkedIn URLs. Okay. All right, guys. I'm going to create this and I'll bring everyone back about 5 minutes till. All right, see you. All right, let's go ahead and get everyone back. How do we do this? Uh-oh, let me see. Breakout rooms. Close all rooms. All right. looks like a lot of people have kind of gone because not everyone likes the breakout room thing, but I thought I would give Stevie a chance, you know? All right, so will you please DM me? We have like 40
Yes.
seconds, so I can tell you I definitely have my experience of like, you know, things, and it's not easy. I got a job. I was let go from that job and I was so depressed and sad. Like it was such a toxic job. And I just kept going and I applied everywhere and I got a new job and I'm really happy where I am. So, you know, there is a place for you. Just don't give up, right? We have another one of these events next week. So just keep coming to our events, networking, and joining us. It's going to help. Hey, Stevie.
Hey, I was bouncing around. I think Alice was the only one I didn't get to chat with.
Yeah, you want to chat with Alice? We have a few minutes.
It's okay. Hi, Alice.
Oh, everyone's beautiful faces. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I'm so glad you joined, and I hope it was helpful to you. Thank you so much, Stevie. You're the best. Excuse me. I appreciate everyone who joins. And I guess that's it for this Fireside Chat series. I put the link for our Slack in the chat. Please join us. And I guess I'll be seeing you guys soon.
Jesse, thank you for hosting and moderating, and you did a lovely job, and appreciate your setting this event up.
No, thanks for joining. I was so happy that someone wanted to, you know, come and have a chat with me by our fake fire.
You did great with the video.
Yeah, next time we'll make all the contestants have them so everyone feels like they're in the mood.
There you go.
No. Thanks, ladies. And best of luck. Have a wonderful evening and talk to you guys soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.